Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Todd Smithline, thank you so much for joining Lawyers Who Learn. It's great to finally get this interview started and see what happens today.
David, great to be part of this. Thanks for having me. Been looking forward to doing this. And I did a little homework. I've been watching some of the Lawyers That Learn podcasts, including the one with your dad, which I like. And,
thank you. No, that's why I interview guests, to make sure I at least get some views. But honestly, I've really been taken aback. I don't know what the right word is, by some of the feedback. Someone actually just posted about watching different podcasts, and other people were commenting on, like, just essentially the theme and the focus is we are an online CLE business.
Yeah.
And we take that seriously. It's mandatory, and there's a lot of value and learning you get from this. However, I also recognize 98% of what you learn as an attorney is not in a CLE course. And so the podcast is about interviewing amazing people like you and understanding from where you've learned in the different parts of your practice. When me and you, thank God for in-person conferences, because we have kind of keep meeting up at different conferences, and most recently in Miami at the Legal Tech Fund Summit. I was telling you, I just did a 4-part series on the alternative fees, the non-billable hour. 2 of the people in it are Gwen Gribbs and Matt Kurbis. I don't know if you know either of them, but Matt has a subscription-based business. It's different than sort of yours are. And I was telling you about it when you're like, because right now you run a software business in contracts. And you're like, I had one of the most successful fixed fee businesses around. I'm like, oh no, I didn't. I'm like, okay, well, let's learn about it. And you even said, I wonder why I left that. And you started rattling off a lot of interesting things and clients you had. And I am very passionate about this topic for small to mid-sized firms, especially with AI going on right now. And so what I want to talk about today is your experience there, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what you've learned and what you would recommend for those who are listening, who either you recommend or not, who are thinking about or already have pursued fixed-based or subscription-based models. So I think that's a good teeing up. And so why don't you just, if you want, just so we can get a sense of what you're doing today, and maybe just like, you can even go reverse, what you're doing today, how you ended up there from having a really successful fixed-based model, then you can circle back to sort of the foundation of that.
Sure. And it's all connected. But let me say one thing before I even say that,
Absolutely.
Which is, I haven't been a lawyer for 30 years and now an entrepreneur. I was one kind of entrepreneur because I ran my own law firm, but I'm obviously running bond terms now, and I'll talk about that in a second. I have to say, David, I really respect what you've done. You look at business totally differently, and what you've been able to accomplish with Lawline, just the breadth of it, is really fantastic. And I applaud you for that, for all that you've accomplished. And also for running this podcast and all the other stuff you do to sort of expand your platform. Because as you were saying, there are not still that many ways for lawyers to learn from each other. Let's just get really basic about that, right? And to share with each other, especially when it comes to the models of how we run our practices and the business side of things. So I applaud you for making that available.
I appreciate that. And you said it better than me. There are not that many ways for lawyers to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And this is one form to do that. So I appreciate that.
And that's also the story of bond terms. So bond terms is a standard agreements company. It's a new form of contracting. Quite simply, what we do is allow a Fortune 500 or Global 2000 customer on one side to contract with a sophisticated software, SaaS, or professional services on the vendor using a standard agreement. That's an agreement drafted by a committee It's designed to be best practice and work for both sides out of the box. You customize it on a cover page, but you really rely very heavily on the standard. And the bond terms platform is simply a very elegant way for the two parties to have that negotiation and come to agreement together in the same place. You can think of it as DocuSign, but a step back. It's the negotiation, but it's that same type of interface. It's click and drag and drop and playbooks. It's not free text. But the story of, go ahead.
Before you get, just one quick question about that.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that and it's super interesting. I know like the most common and the most basic is NDAs, but what, just out of curiosity, where do you see the bread and butter?
Sure.
For where firms and organizations will, or two companies will use this together.
The killer app of bond terms turns out to be the professional services agreement. It is the agreement that is the most widely used across the most different customers and vendors. It's the most easy to accomplish all types of different things. So the bond terms system, and it is a full system now. We've been publishing these for 3 years. We're distributed by Atlassian and DocuSign. We have a lot of Fortune 500 and very large companies using the system at this point. The standard agreements and more on the platform. We have a non-disclosure agreement. That's what we released 3 years ago, sort of first to market with the standard NDA. Then a SaaS agreement we call Cloud Terms. We have an SLA, a service level agreement that goes with the SaaS agreement, a professional services agreement, a DPA. Right now we're working on a series of ESG agreements. But the professional services agreement turns out—
When you say, just to be clear, what do you mean by professional service agreement?
So it's a PSA. It's an agreement that allows you to engage a contractor to do any kind of service for you. They could be writing code. They could be writing marketing copy. They could be creating art. They could be building a product for you. It's like, if you think of what we call commercial contracting, so there's $2 trillion a year spent on IT, software, SaaS, professional services, some sort of either technology itself or implementation services around technology.
Got it.
And that's one of the core agreements underlying it. But the story of bond terms is really that we have this committee. It's now got over 100 lawyers that collaborate together in drafting these agreements. And that committee consists of lawyers from 8 major law firms, from Fortune 500 companies, and from the tech stack, really from pick your A point, Anthropic or Atlassian to Zapier or Zendesk, and back with both Facebook and Google in the middle. These are all volunteers. It's a very active committee. Happen to have another meeting tomorrow, but the cadence is 1 or 2 a month. We publish an agreement about every 6 months. It takes us about 10 drafts per agreement to get it right. A lot of meetings, survey monkey, a lot of talking back and forth. But I am going to tie this to fixed fee because this is the truth of the story of bond terms. So I ran a somewhat unusual boutique law firm for about 2 decades. That law firm had, let's say, about 10 lawyers, and we were very lucky. We're here in San Francisco. We were able to represent a number of what are now the biggest companies in the world, frankly, and the biggest companies in tech as they were coming up. Okay. And they came to our firm for a very particular problem, which was the contracts for how they relate to their customers, their developers, their ecosystem. So that's one thing we did for them. We set up their templates and their playbooks and we trained their attorneys. The second thing we did, David, is we advised them around what's now called product legal. It didn't even have a name back then. That was the fact that they're releasing an app into the world and they have questions about the screen under which they're going to collect data or get acceptance from the user. Or they're putting a marketplace out in the world and it needs a new type of agreement because they're selling a product in a marketplace in a whole new way. Or they're going into music, or they're going into to other areas because they're large platforms now doing all different types of things, and there are legal questions behind that. So we specialized also in that work. And the last thing we did was we helped our clients with a lot of privacy because GDPR and CCPA was coming on the scene and everybody was becoming regulated. Now I'm going to tie it back to bond terms. When CCPA came out, California Consumer Privacy Act in 2000, all of a sudden, almost all of the almost all of the SaaS companies in Silicon Valley became regulated, meaning that for the first time, they were having to deal with an omnibus data privacy regulation. Now, the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Because you're losing me a little bit because I have ADD. So I just want to
let me come back. Yeah,
it's important because if you're losing me, I just want to. So let's just slow down for a second there. So if that's okay.
100%. Yeah.
So you're clearly, obviously, very knowledgeable, and you're doing this. But let's just start from, you had a successful law firm for 2 decades.
Yeah.
When did you switch from the billable hour to a subscription model, or was that from the beginning?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say about the law firm models, we started off using a software called time slips, recording our hour and charging by the hour like everybody else. But a strange thing was happening, which was every January we would sit down, my partner at the time and I, and we'd do our forecast for the year. And we could guess for each of our clients within a band of about 10, 15% what the revenue was going to be for the year. We could figure this out in January. So it occurred to us that we were spending a lot of time, especially as a small firm, that we were a real firm in person. We wanted to run efficiently. We were spending a lot of time with this invoicing system that we didn't particularly like. It happened to be old technology even at the time, but we also just didn't like the fact that we had to deal with it and send these invoices and wait to get paid. So it was very simple. We made a list of all the clients. Let's say we had about 20 clients at the time. We figured out what we thought they were going to pay us. And we did this by looking at the last 12 months of billables and dividing by 12. And for the first few, we went to them with that number and we said, we're going to give you a 5% discount if you'll agree to switch to fixed fee with us. So David, after about the third client, they were all agreeing. We stopped offering the discount. We simply said, we're going to charge you this by month. Now, we made a couple decisions that served us extremely well over the next couple decades. The first was that we did not make them commit to any period of time, which was that we felt strongly that they were going to enjoy the service. Frankly, they were going to love the service and appreciate it enough that we could bear the risk of them not signing a long-term contract. The second thing was, and this is really important as a service provider, you don't ever want to collect a dollar from a customer who's not happy with you. And by the way, we follow the same rule here at Bond Terms, and I bet you follow a similar rule over there at Law Line, which is this. The cost of an unhappy customer is very expensive to you. So what you want to do when somebody's unhappy is see if you can fix the problem. And otherwise, you want to thank them very much and let them go. But you certainly don't want to invoice them in that moment, right? And so first decision we made was very month-to-month commitment. In fact, we told them, if you call us on the 20th and you want to end it, we're going to cut it at the 20th and prorate you the last 10 days. The second thing is, and I learned this from David Maister, has a book called Managing the Professional Services Firm. Very good books. He wrote a series of books. They all basically say the same thing, but they're probably the best business books I've ever read. And we stole something from him, which is, he said, you put on your invoice a service promise. And what it says is, this is the amount of the invoice, but we want you to be thrilled with our service. So only pay the amount you think the service was worth, if you think it was worth less. Put that on every single invoice we ever sent. It was taken up exactly 0 times. But between not locking people in on a commitment and delivering that promise, it's almost a judo move. And what I mean by that is, if you say to the client, it's a fixed fee, you can quit anytime you want, all of a sudden the pressure swaps. They now feel they're getting something of value from you, and they learn to respect that because they like it and they appreciate you and they want to maintain the relationship. So I will tell you, in the early years of fixed fee, we had the clients approach us as many times as we approached them to reset it, and it was to move it up. Okay. We even once had a company cut us a bonus check, which was like crazy, as a law firm, to get an unsolicited bonus check from your clients. So what I learned at the early days was that keep it simple and go high trust with the client, both directions. And that's what enables you to really make the system work.
That is unbelievable insight. Here's what I think is really important, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What type of work were you doing with the clients then, where it was that sort of, you could essentially understand what they're going to be, forecast what they're spending? So
here's how I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to explain to you exactly what we're doing, but then I'm going to tell you something, which is that I believe, and I have seen it done with any kind of practice. Okay. The fact that we bill by the hour, as you probably know, and maybe you've explored in some of these programs, is itself an artifice. Like, the original system was for services rendered, right? The lawyer would just send the bill and the client would pay it. And as you well know, Cravath and other firms still operate that way to this day. So the idea that the hourly measurement or the minute by minute measurement, sort of the best way to do this, is just the way it sort of happened. And outside of certain very discrete circumstances, litigation where you're accounting for costs and those sorts of things, there are no rules that say you have to bill by the hour. Okay, that's just not how the system works. You can bill any way you like, as long as you're clear about it in advance and otherwise fair with client. So what did we do? We did three things. We had a commercial side of the practice, which was to help our clients set up their templates and their playbooks and their agreements and help them negotiate their deals with their customers, their vendors, and their partners. We did what's now called product legal advising, and that was helping them with the interface between the products they were putting out in the world and the regulatory frameworks they were living under, so around collection of data and that sort of thing. And we advised on open source. But what I really believe is that this method of charging works only if the service delivery model matches the pricing method. Now, what do I mean by that? So we were already very internally focused at our law firm. And what I mean is that we would spend maybe 40, 50% of our time developing common tools and approaches that we'd apply across all of our clients. And we were extremely conscientious about this. I mean, in our server at the time, we had different folders, and some of the folders would be marked like outward-facing client materials, and we'd curate those and we'd update those. So let's say somebody came to us and said, we're going to start a SaaS marketplace, because a bunch of our clients got into this business. So there's a bunch of research that had to be done. It has to do with the payment flows. It has to do with how that company is recognized as either the merchant of record or not. Are they there's a legal framework of questions. There's a practical framework of questions. So when you get that project as a law firm, you have to ask yourself, am I doing this project for this client at one time, or am I now going to become expert in this and create a set of materials that any client facing the same problem is going to be able to utilize? We always started with the template. So if you came to us and said, I'm running this kind of affiliate program and these are the attributes of it, we would first draft that agreement so it would work for anybody generically, and then we layer in the specific things for you. Why? A, so that we had a clear picture of what we were drafting, and B, so that the work was reusable. So if you take that mindset of creating reusable chunks of work, and if you want to make sure that all of your people internally have the best knowledge of everybody else, and then you want to expand that to make sure all of your clients have the best knowledge of everybody within your firm, that's a lot of inward-facing work. That's a lot of refining the resources and materials and reusing them over and over again.
So that's really interesting. And obviously it doesn't apply to everything, but it sounds simpler than I'm sure it is. But what I'm hearing you say is when you create a template, it might take you 20% more time to turn it into a template first, but that gave you a lot more energy, to be honest, because now you're like, okay, now let's go after these type of clients because we have this template, and it gave you focus.
Yeah. So imagine I'm a client, and this happened quite often in the tech space and the internet space, that they came across a new area they were going into. They had a new set of problems, that payments, or they had an issue around open source. Now imagine they come to you with a question. Now, if you've already answered a similar question for another client, and what you've done is created a briefer and a checklist and a set of tools around that. Imagine how thrilled they are, David, when they come in with a question. They say, first of all, here's the first set of answers already, right? Sometimes that's all they even need. Now that exchange might be a minute, okay? Literally 1 minute, but you've delivered a huge amount of value. So the benefit of fixed fee is if you match your service model with your pricing model, and it only works, again, if you set your service model up this way, it allows you to build repeatable blocks of knowledge and process. Whether you're in immigration or whether you're in M&A, it doesn't really matter. Patents, I mean, every form of practice has the parts of the practice, which are expertise or repeatable blocks of knowledge that you're going to apply in different ways. You refine those, and you refine the delivery system, and then you end up getting paid for your knowledge, your expertise, and then your focus on the particular custom questions when they come in. And that's what we did.
What was the most difficult parts of that process? And especially I'm thinking of an attorney who is just starting out, right? They want to build a practice from the ground up, this model. So they don't have a forecast. They don't have clients, but they want to to build that up, and maybe that's not the way to go. But I would like to. Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, what didn't? It's never that easy. So I'm just gonna.
Let me back up and say the implicit thing we haven't said. This model really works well if you have a service people want. Okay, you're going to struggle to move people to fixed fee if you can't provide a service that a customer really wants and package it and define it in a way they can understand in advance, right? In tech, the most common thing in the world is to talk about packaging and pricing. But in the legal world, we just talk about pricing, okay? So you know, your business, you have all different types of packages of ways people can access your MCLE and your service, right? In the legal world, when you have this conversation, we have these people in law firms that are called pricing people, you know, but really, to me, you got to step back and say, how do I look at my practice and figure out what the product is, okay? The product is not your time. And by the way, with the rise of AI, the product is no longer you being an intermediary to a set of expert knowledge either, okay? Because that's over, all right? So the product is the overall way you deliver that service. So the first thing I'd recommend people do is rethink about the service they provide and package it. Figure out what are the steps, how do I deliver it, what's repeatable, and how do I give a menu to a client in advance so they see that.
Can we just go through a hypothetical? Let's say you're an estate planning attorney.
Yeah.
Would you be able to, or would you rather do what you did?
Well, let's do both. Let me give you a perfect example for us. So every company in the world that lives in the online space does online contracting, and there's questions about how they implement the workflow around that. When they get the acceptance, whether there's a button that toggles, is it checked or not? What does it say? Okay. It turns out to be a really, really important legal question. Why? Because if you don't implement that the right way, you have no contract, and then you have no damages cap, no choice of law, all that stuff, right? When you would come to our firm to ask us the question about how to implement that, and by the way, it's an area where each lawyer sort of had their own opinion. There's all kinds of folklore. What do? We invested in understanding every single federal district court case and circuit court case that had ever looked at this question. Yep. And we put them all together in a chart, not a memo, a chart. And then we distilled out the very important, significant difference of each one. So then people would come to us with this question and we'd say, I'm just going to send you the memo first. You're probably going to get there on your own. And it allowed us to, that was a lot of work, right? But there's an example of a tool. Then they would show us the screens and we'd have the conversations, but we were able to really focus it.
Did you send them that memo for free or after they
were on subscription? But I would tell you this, I would send it to them for free if they weren't a client yet.
Right, totally.
The first really big account we landed, which is now $1 trillion social media company, brought us in because we had understood how to talk about open source with engineers. We had a matrix and a chart, and we simplified this legal question. And they invited us in, we gave that for free. And then they brought us back and we represented them for 13 years. I don't even know if we ever talked about open source again, okay? I am a very strong proponent of attorneys putting their very best knowledge into tools that clients can easily digest and making them available for free at the front.
Is there anything else that's $1 trillion social media company than Meta? Am I missing?
No, but that is who it was. Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. So
you had Meta as a client or Facebook?
Yeah, we had Meta as a client. We had Adobe as a client. We had,
take me there for 1 second, just as an aside note.
Yeah.
To get Facebook as a client, even back 15 years ago, is not an easy task. And so now I'm thinking, okay, this guy's, and I hear you talking and hear you doing, he's a brilliant guy. He's a great attorney. Like, we're talking about the elite of the elite. Can this really be replicated by a new attorney or a younger attorney going out there?
Absolutely. Okay. Look, we were fortunate at our firm. We were in an area we knew a lot about. We figured out how to sell this thing. But I will tell you this, everything we learned is repeatable by others in the sense that we just took a different frame. So the first frame you have to take is that you've got to figure out how to communicate to that customer, to your client, what your service is and the value of it. So let's say it's Wilson Estate. I love this example the most. Think about how convoluted and confusing that is as the customer, okay? First of all, the agreement itself is like this huge agreement. It's very hard to read, even as a lawyer, to read and understand. What is the best first touch if I'm doing a will and an estate. It's for the lawyer to approach me with a flow chart that says, this is how this is going to play out. This is when you're born. This is when you get married. This is when you get divorced. This is when you get married again. This is when your kids are born. And this is when you die. And this is how this whole thing is going to play out. And these are the decisions you're going to have to make at each point. And these are the agreements that are underneath that. The legal wording itself should be the very last thing you present to them. You should. Go ahead.
That's fair. I mean, I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking, and as you're breaking that all down, and I'm wondering, is this the wrong? I wonder what your thought is here, because there's an incredible amount of work when you create the estate planning, right? Yeah. Build the trust, do the will, do all that stuff, and then there's every 5-10 years you need to update it. And so as you were saying all that, and you're, to your point, not even getting it, and to some degree, financial advisors should be involved, not just the attorney, because they might not. Yeah. It's a business strategy too. But the question where I get, and financial advisors don't even charge you a subscription fee; they charge you 1% of what you put with them. Yeah. And so, is that a bad example? Because for B2B, it makes sense because you're constantly going to be needing work. When you do a trust or estate planning, it's a one-time, you can spend tens of thousands of dollars, and then maybe in 10, 15 years, you do it again. So does that lead to a subscription?
It's not, okay, but let's play that out. First of all, it doesn't have to be a monthly fee. It could be a fixed fee. It could be a fixed fee with parts. It could be some sort of subscription. My belief is I really would love if my wills and trust attorney had me on some sort of subscription, even if I wasn't paying every month, for changes in the law, for changes in my life, for updating things, because we all know, when is the last time any of us touched those schedules, that we did in our revocable trust?
Totally.
But I would back it up again. And this is a different conversation we set up to have, but I'm happy to have it, which is to say, I think the most interesting question is not how you price it, but how you package it and how you understand the product you're delivering.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think that's the part the lawyers have the hardest struggle with. And I would encourage them to understand, especially, we're having this conversation in January 2025. There are no rules anymore, like literally, okay? The clients are prepared and ready to accept new modes of doing everything, and they're going to get it through AI anyways. So take this as an opportunity to look at the service you provide, whether you're a patent litigator, wills and trusts, whatever you're doing out in the world, and say to yourself, if I had to explain this to someone in a whole new way, where I was selling them a product, not a service, not by the hour, I had to explain to them what this relationship was going to be like, the inputs they needed to give me, the outputs I was going to give them, the wraparound language they needed to understand it. What your client wants is for you to anchor them in the middle of a complex process with a map and tools to get it done. And here's the crazy thing. We learned at our firm that over time, our clients were taking on more and more of the actual grinding work, the negotiations of the contracts and other things, because we were enabling them through templates, playbooks, office hours to do it themselves. And they were only reaching out to us then for the most complicated touch points, all right? So before you think about pricing, I'd encourage you to step back and say, how do I describe what I do? Do I even have a document, a picture that I can hand to a potential client that will make them understand that I understand the process they're about to enter into really well? This is the map we're going to follow. And this is how my service relates to that.
Well, it's interesting because what I hear you saying is you ended up helping more with strategy and non-legal conversations because, one, they're not afraid to call you because they're not being billed to call you. Yeah. And two, a lot of the legwork's being done. So you're almost advising them how they can do it on their own. Obviously, like you said, litigation's a different beast. But
we have firms who we got to know over the years who perfected this for litigation. I want to come back to something you just said.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to call you. Think about the fact that we are a service industry that is set up the way we charge so that our clients feel uncomfortable every time they reach out to us.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
Ridiculous.
So here's what we learned with fixed fee at my firm. The AGCs, the staff attorneys, the contracts negotiators, we had some who would reach out to us every day, sometimes multiple times a day with questions. And they were comfortable doing that because nobody was ever going to call them in an office at the end of a quarter and say, why are they talking to Smithline 7 times a day, every day? Okay. We build with an executive summary of what we did, a 1-page chart. We did, in fact, record the dates we had calls and that there was a call, but we didn't record the time. And frankly, I'm not sure any client in 2 decades even ever looked at any of that detail. Okay, we didn't do that narrative thing, but we did, of course, record when something happened. But David, of course, what we allowed for was that our customer to interact with us, how our customer wanted to interact, when they wanted to interact. And then, of course, you know what happens. Hey, Todd, can you send somebody over here to get briefed on our new product? Can you send somebody over here to talk to finance about this thing they want to do? We just want you guys to know what we're doing. Lawyers complain all the time. I want to be brought in earlier in the process. You know how you get brought in early in the process? Provide a service people love, and also don't charge by the hour.
All right, here's $1 million question.
Yeah.
The passion and the knowledge and the excitement from talking about this exudes from you.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing this right now? It seems like you not only are not doing it, there's probably a business opportunity to build a platform to help others do this. Like, what am I missing here?
Because I'm doing something even more interesting, which is I'm tilting at a $2 trillion windmill of commercial contracting. So
but before you get to that, that is exciting, and I'm with you. But you don't just leave something because it's not all sunshines and rainbows, I assume. There was probably other reasons you were ready to stop doing that.
I'll give you the honest answer of why I'm not running a law firm anymore and I run bond firms. The pandemic hit and our associates all moved away. They moved to Oregon. So we were in San Francisco, California.
Got it.
Okay. Got it. And when I moved to San Francisco as a young associate, we're here now. Bond Terms is in Embarcadero. We're a couple blocks from where I used to be on Montgomery Street. But, when I moved to San Francisco in 1993 and got my first.
How did you do that? What did you just do?
Oh, I have 2 cameras. That's my view camera, Dave.
Oh, okay, cool. That was actually your view.
That's my view. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I got so confused. I'm like, what just happened?
What am I looking at? Yeah.
Okay.
So when you pay rent, you want people to know you pay rent. I moved to San Francisco in 1993. As an associate at a law firm, you thought maybe one day I'll buy a house. What I realized when the pandemic hit is that, this whole next tier that came into this profession, they don't think they're ever going to spend their life here. So the pandemic, they all went home to wherever home is. It was Oregon, it was Oklahoma, it was Boston. And so we had to make a decision in my firm. Do you want to operate a remote firm? It's as simple as that. I didn't want to do it. I've been in person my whole life. I enjoyed mentoring, training. I teach. I've been teaching for 15 years at Berkeley. I just didn't want to do it. And I had this other idea. And the idea was, what if I took this committee I'd created at my law firm? We'd created a committee around understanding the California Consumer Privacy Act, which was passed in around 2020. And it sort of regulated companies around data for the first time very broadly. And we had this working group that we'd put together around that. And I went to that same working group, and they ended up being the first 30 lawyers on the Bond Terms Committee. The Bond Terms Committee now has over 100 lawyers. And I said, would you be interested in working with me on a set of standard agreements to solve the problem of this really inefficient way we negotiate NDAs and SaaS agreements and professional service agreements? And that's where Bond Terms came from.
Okay, that definitely gives insight. And I don't think I realized that it was the pandemic that sort of shifted things, which it's just pretty recent. The only thing I would say, obviously, there's your personal interests, right? What gives you energy, but from the outside standpoint, the type of business that you are running, and I say business, not law firm, actually seems to fit really well in a remote model, because it's not based on hourly billing that you have to be on top of people for. It's based on building products and services. So it almost feels like, besides what you want, it seems like it still could have been.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, our whole engineering team's in Argentina, but let me tell you this. I'm in Embarcadero in San Francisco, California. Within walking distance of this office, I have half the members on my committee. They are engaged with us as volunteers to help us draft these agreements. Our customers are near us. It's really nice to be able to sit down and meet them in person. I'm introducing a new form of contracting and a new type of contracting platform. So there's still huge advantages to us to being.
Love it. So imagine you were advising me for Lawline, and I wanted to give small to mid-sized firms the powers and the tools to replicate what you did, because I truly believe. So one of my missions, my personal missions, is personal freedom, right? Your time. It's why I moved to Barcelona for a couple of years. It's why I travel a lot with my family. It's why we are now a remote company. We actually now have a 4-day work week. We do a lot of different things. And also it's why we have a product that makes it really easy and efficient to do online learning, because I value attorneys' time. And that's just for me. I realized time, you got one shot at this. Time is more valuable than anything. And so and now we're at a time with AI where what you did in the past, when you started, is even easier. I would love to help attorneys do what you did. For this hypothetical, let's say. What would you advise me and Lawline to do to set up other firms for success here? How could I help do what you started and build it up?
Well, first of all, I will say what I said at the beginning. The person who should be giving advice here is you to me, because you run a very successful business. With that out of the way, I would reframe it. So I think that the pricing, what happens when you talk about fixed fee as a pricing conversation, is people want language that they can use in an engagement letter. They think there's some magical, mythical calculus, right, that's going to tell them what to charge. And they just focus on that. I would refocus them on understanding that what they sell is a product, that there's a market for that product, and it's their job to explain to the customer what makes them different and why their product is better. And that in the legal field, for whatever reason, sometimes that feels like an uncomfortable conversation, but we're running businesses here, okay? You do not need to compromise your ethics or the quality of the services you deliver or any of those things to package it, okay? The two things are totally unrelated. So my suggestion would be that they focus on understanding their practice area, what their customer wants, and how to touch the customer at the front end. And by the way, I use that word customer unapologetically. You know, as lawyers, we say client, but it's still a customer, right? How do you touch them at the front end with the description of the service you're about to provide that feels like a product? Because that's how they're buying everything else.
All right. So let's because when I hear that, the first thing I think, let's just use the estate planning attorney example. I think of a traditional biz dev coach, right? They're like, what's your USP? Like, don't say you're a estate planner, say you make people's legacy come true. And then, create a nice image on the site. And here's a 5-step things that we do.
But I'm talking about focusing inward on the actual service you're delivering. I'm not talking about marketing, although I guess that's part of it. We didn't know marketing at my firm. The marketing we did was we would have these tools we'd send out for free when somebody would reach out to us. We'd always greet them with a high quality deliverable that they didn't pay for, always. That's how we started every relationship. By the way, when we encountered new clients, we'd start them on a fixed fee that was beneath $1,000 less than our minimum. So our minimum went from like 10 to 11 to 12 or whatever over the course of the years, but the minimum to start with us was always 1,000 less. So let's say our minimum was 10 a month. We'd start you at 9 on a exploratory month, we called it. And we'd say, we're not going to talk about the fee at all this month. We're just going to provide our service. And if we get to the end of the month, and then we'd have a chart with columns of like, are you 10 grand, 15 grand, 20, whatever a month, okay? We would not present any of that till after the first month. And if we got to the end of the first month, and either of us didn't have the information we needed to make a pricing decision, we'd say, we're going to give you another month at 9,000 or another month after that. The point is deliver the value first in a clear way, and then it's easier to set the pricing.
Who do you think, again, in this hypothetical thing where Lawline, or let's just call it Lawline, X company was starting, right? Who are the best firms as the initial market that you think are so ripe to productize and figure out?
So I think transactional is the easiest. So technology transactions, commercial transactions, repeatable contracts. If you're doing NDAs or SaaS agreements, professional, anything like that. I think other types of devising, which is ongoing, so HR, labor, those sorts of things. There's always onboarding, there's always offboarding, there's always a stream of questions about new employees and all that stuff. But like I said, I know litigation firms that have done this very successfully. I know pretty much all types of practices. The first way we experimented with the model before we moved all our clients to is we used to do something called outsourcing. And outsourcing was taking the entire accounting function of a Fortune 500 and moving it to a provider in, let's say, India, okay? It's basically all the work of an M&A with no closing dinner. I mean, it was desultory. We just didn't like it. And also, it was out of our control how long the deal was going to take because it really was dependent on our client creating all these schedules that describes all these processes they've never written down before. So we used to say to those customers, it's like 10K a month until you get the deal done. You're in control of it, not us. And that's just the way it's going to be. So there are all different ways to parse this out. And by the way, I'm using these phrases 10,000. It could be 1,000. It could be 100,000. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It just matters that you separate the service from the pricing and you spend most of what I would encourage somebody who wants to change how they charge, spend 90% of your time thinking about your service that you deliver, not in a marketing sense, but actually the core of the service. Do you have a checklist? Do you have the same workflow for every client? Are there pieces along the way that can be perfected so that they can be reused by every single client? That's how you get to efficiency.
Yeah. In another world, let's say you had an infinite amount of time where you can replicate yourself.
Yeah.
Do you see there's an opportunity? Because you clearly have a lot of knowledge, you clearly have a good understanding of it and a lot of confidence around it. And I know you could help hundreds of law firms if you had a time.
Yeah.
Do you see it? Is that a business? Like, could you build a business that do you think the firms, is there a need that firms they would like it, but would they actually want to pay that you could scale your business like that? Because that's how I determine if this is going to happen or not. Is this just going to happen on the fringes, or could you actually build a business that would be a 7-figure business and continue to scale by helping law firms scale in this way?
Let me say something more radical than that. And I've never said this before. I didn't believe this about crypto. I didn't believe this about Web3. I have not believed this really about anything. And I've seen all of the advancements. We're recording this in January 2025. I do not think the way most lawyers do their practice is going to survive until June of this year. And it's definitely not going to survive until January of 2026. To the extent lawyers were operating as intermediaries to knowledge, that's pretty much going to be over, okay? Because the knowledge is now available to everybody everywhere. Also, in my world, transactional practice, to the extent you as an individual lawyer were being handed control over a contract negotiation as an individual human being, I got news for you. That's coming to an end very fast soon, all because of AI, right? So I actually think the more interesting question for the lawyers right now is, how do I create a mode of practice that leverages these tools and my expertise and knowledge, and that offers what the client is going to want 6 and 12 months from now? Because I think it's changing really fast. And I think for many, and I don't mean to be negative, but I think for many lawyers, this is going to be very existential. And I've never said anything like this before in my career.
I appreciate what you're saying, but my pushback to you is you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't know what to do with it, if you're dealing with an issue, are you going to trust what you're reading online, or do you want to talk to an attorney who at least can make sure that it's right?
You're still going to talk to the attorney, but what's going to happen is that what you were relying on the attorney for before, in terms of managing access to information, you're going to start the conversation with that. Now, the information may not be complete. It may not be accurate. I am not suggesting the Brave New World will necessarily always result in delivery of better services. Who knows? Maybe, probably not. But what I'm telling you is the client's expectations are going to change.
So back to my original question, to determine if this is on the fringes or really there, is there a business do you see a business that can be a significant size business to help prepare the tens of thousands, if not thousands or hundreds of small to mid-sized firms, and be practice what you preach, build it where you're a subscription model,
Yeah.
for the firms that you're serving to help them do that. And I know there's some platforms out there that exist. Even Gwen Gribbs, who was on this, she has one that is doing this. I know there's a couple others that are trying to support them. So I'm curious.
I think though, it's not that the platform's about the pricing, the platform's about the service. What do I mean by that? You build the operating system of the knowledge for the area that the lawyers can operate on top of. We're doing that with contracts. So if you operate, we have a free roll on the bond terms platform. Any lawyer can take care of any of their clients, moving back and forth between their client accounts, and we don't charge them. We only charge the in-house groups, procurement, sales, or legal. We do not charge the law firms, the outside lawyers. Carta's got a similar model where you can go in and out of your client accounts, okay? So build the base layer. Carta has built the base layer of the cap table. Bond Terms has built this base layer of the contract with the contracts in there, but you still need the lawyers to operate on top of that, to set it up the way you want it and to deal with the negotiation points you need to deal with. So I think the future is going to be, let's talk about wills and trusts. There is no reason why that whole process shouldn't be automated by now. The storage of the information, even the creation of some of the documents, the lawyers operate on top with their expertise, but we don't have every law firm, especially every small practice, David, seeking to replicate the same stack of knowledge and approach.
So what would be going back to this business, what would be the business? What would they be doing for law firms in your mind?
Yeah. I think it would cross a line people probably aren't comfortable with yet, and I didn't know that we'd be getting there, but it would be providing much more of the service of
what does that mean?
So let's take Wilson Trust. I know we keep talking about this.
Yeah, I brought it up.
Let's talk about the pieces of that. First of all, there's just the informational piece, like the schedules. It's crazy to me that data is still kept in Word documents, okay? So you'd provide an interface for your client, and you'd say to the client, for the law firm, you'd say, hey, just fill this thing in. We'll refresh it when we need to. It's not going to live in a PDF document anymore. It lives in the platform. Okay.
Are you saying let's say you were building a second software company or whatever service company?
Yeah.
Your first industry you wanted to practice area would be estate planning, let's say.
Yeah.
You would build your own models and things like that. And you would say, law firm, you can use this, or you're saying you'd work with that law firm to do what they use?
No. Law firms, you use this. I would build a product for the law firms. First step is I would just say,
you would have expertise on staff that would know what trust and estates for. And again, it's very state specific. So every state might be different.
It could all be customized on top. But what you'd say to the lawyer is, do you want to spend your day in a document called Trustors Assets, and updating it because there are this many shares in Schwab now and there's this many shares in Bernstein? Or do you want to spend your day diagramming for them the scenarios that are going to happen when they sell their business or that next child is born and having that conversation with them? And you want to rely on a platform that is going to remove the burden of you of keeping track of all that other information and allow you to operate on top of it. Now, maybe somebody's already built this, who knows? But what I'm saying is, I think across a lot of practice areas, you will see some level of the practice management or some level of the actual practice get platformed, and the lawyers will operate on top.
I freaking love that. I do. And it just makes too much sense. And because what I love about it, it's actually not an easy thing to do. Yeah. You need to have industry knowledge, software knowledge. You have to keep updating. It's not like, oh, I've done this before. Let me teach you how I did it. It doesn't work. Like maybe, but that's not what this is. This is a very hard business to build, but it will be built with the help of AI, with the help of experienced attorneys, and it will transform the industry. And I wonder, this is from 2 years ago, we were in a roundtable discussion. I don't know if you remember, where people are also talking about another really important topic, which maybe we'll do on another podcast, because I could talk. There's a lot. You're clearly one of the smarter guys in the room. We were talking about the unauthorized practice of law, and these two things I think intersect clearly.
Hugely important conversation.
Yeah. Let me.
I'm for the 100th time, I'm going to interrupt you. I just want to grab something.
No, please.
Okay, because it's really important. And when I talk about platforms and all this, I want people to understand. I am a lawyer. I respect the law. I teach the law. I think we need to take the expertise out of lawyers' heads, get them into reusable assets, platforms, and ways of doing business and products. But the lawyers still need to be there. The reason we've been able to build bond terms successfully is because we really understand the contract. And lawyers out there who really understand, their areas of practice, what I would encourage you to do is start building your own repeatable tools. You can use AI to do that. You can use different systems to do that. Think about how your practice would run tomorrow if you can come into the office? How much of it could you set up so it happened? And I don't mean just hand over a bunch of AI prompts. I mean, can you build a platform or a system, a workflow for what you do? That's how you're going to be valuable going forward, because everything that's easy and repeatable will get automated, and you'll spend the rest of your time dancing around on top on the more strategic questions. And that's the core advice I'd give.
I'm going to give you a final question. And then
Yeah.
at the end of every interview, I give you the opportunity to ask me a question if there's anything that comes to your mind. And if not, we can leave it at this final question.
Yeah.
Do you see this as something that Clio will eventually try to get into? And because it's a new frontier where they can start building this up in different areas.
So you can go from expertise to code right now faster than ever in the history of computing, okay? Even in the 3 years I've been running Bonterms, the way we create new products and features is totally evolved, okay? So you can wait around for Clio to do it, which is, let's say, already top down, or you can say, I understand this area of practice. There's nobody representing veterinary clinics better than me. I know the subtlety of it. I can do it blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back. And what I would say to that lawyer is, figure out what makes you special, write it down, and productize it. This is your opportunity. Don't wait for them to do it for you. You do it. It's easier to do now than it's ever been.
That fired me up. I wish I was practicing law and now I could do that. Thank you. That was really helpful. Is there any, from this interview, from all of our conversations past, from what we just talked about, is there any question that comes to mind that
I guess the thing I would say is, we look at you and think you're skating along, and you've built a successful business, obviously got a ton of repeatable elements in it. You sort of own the space. But I'm sure it's not all up days. How do you manage through, and you got a family and all that, which you share with people publicly, and the travels and all that. How do you manage through the difficult moments? That's what I want to know. How do you manage through the most difficult moments when they come up?
So I wrote a book in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset. And there's a whole section of the book on how to deal. So in the Fast Forward Mindset, it's 3 steps: how to get out of your comfort zone, how to stay out of your comfort zone, and how to find your focus once you're out there. And step 2, how to stay out of your comfort zone, was one of the hardest things. Yeah. Because I'm the kind of, like most entrepreneurs, we can, what is it? Ready, shoot, aim, right? Ready, fire, aim. And so it was very easy for me to get out of my comfort zone and try new things all the time, because I have an idea, I have an impulse, and I go and do it. What would happen was, after I do it, I'd be like, oh shit, what did I do? I didn't think this through thoroughly enough, because clearly I can see you do that. And so there's 2 components that's really been helpful for me, because when you're in that, it's the wave. And when you're in the wave, it's never as bad as you think, and it's never as good as you think. But it's a wave, and after doing this for a while, when you're in the lowest moments, eventually you'll get through it and go through that. So I focus on mental things that I could do in the moment, because I've, to your point, I've had moments you're so stressed in that moment. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, I could just say this: I was never depressed or suicidal or anything like that, but you're so stressed in that moment. At least in that moment, you can understand for a moment why someone would commit suicide, because all the pain goes away. And I'm not saying I was even there, but I could understand it. Right? Luckily, I can't even relate to it right now because I'm in there. So there's just 5 things that I started doing to get out of that state. And that's what I'll share. Is 1, and they're all things you've heard before, but I do them almost regularly. I journal. Sometimes I would be so stressed, I wouldn't even know what I was stressed about. And I would just do a brain dump of okay, what am I stressed? I'm like, oh, okay. Actually, I'm not really stressed. And it would literally just disappear. The second thing, the most, again, basic things you hear, I would focus on gratitude, because I realize I don't want to admit it, but too often I have a scarcity mindset, especially as an entrepreneur, right? The glass is half empty. And I looked at all the things that went wrong versus what is going right. And so I would just, for a project that wasn't going well, I would just say everything that's going well in what I'm doing and how we got there. So that was number 2. Number three, I would do what I'm sort of doing now. I would fill my bucket. And the best way to fill your, I don't know if you ever, there's a book called How to Fill Your Bucket. And it's about how to get energy in the day. Have you heard of this book?
No, I like it.
Okay. What would you think, before I tell you, would be the number one way to fill your bucket so you have energy?
Well, for me, it's to go for a swim over here, to do laps, by far. Exercise for me, yeah. Well,
Totally exercise. What would you, so exercise 100%. I'll just tell you, and it's such a win-win. When you give other people true compliments, and you're amazing at it. And I don't know if you just do it with me or with everybody. It doesn't matter. You complimented me in the beginning of this. When we were at the Legal Tech Fund Summit, me and you were talking, somebody came by and we started, and I was like, I started talking to him. You're like, stop. Let me tell you who you're talking to here. Dave Sherman, XYZ, Dave Sherman. And I'm like, I made a joke. You need to come with me every word. You filled my bucket. But I guarantee you, when you gave me those compliments, you filled your own bucket because you felt energized.
Can I just say something about this one point?
Yeah.
One thing I've learned as I've grown up, if you're thinking something nice about somebody, go ahead and say it. It's a very funny thing that for whatever reason, this is like a late in life kind of thing for me, where I realize like, I'm saying, well, this is exactly how I feel about you, right? And so, and it's just letting go of that voice that says you shouldn't say it. Well, of course you should say it. They want to hear it. Everybody else wants to hear it. Yeah.
Well, I would even go as far, and I do it now, even I would take 5 dimes or 5 things. I put it in my left side of my pocket. And I would say, okay, by the end of the day, I have to move them all over to my right side of the pocket. And you would do it. And the thing is, I would literally be giving you a compliment just so I can move this over. And I've done this and I'm doing it. And I know I'm doing it and I mean it, but I'm doing it just so I can move it over. And you see the energy you give the other person, and you feel a little guilty, but also happy that you did that. And when you're doing that, that stress at that moment is gone. I'll just leave you with the one more, and then we can end it on there. There's a book called The Complaint-Free World. And before I tell you what I did, they give you this analogy in this book, where this paint store had I think it was a baseball hanging from the ceiling. And every time somebody would come in, it was a tradition, they would do 1 coat of paint on the baseball. And I think this was like 15, 20 years this happened. How much do you think that baseball weighed after that, like 15 years?
Hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
It was 2 tons, and it's being held up by a crane outside there. And the analogy and the comparison is complaints. They had a strategy where you put on a bracelet and you're trying to go complaint free for 30 days. It's impossible, because whenever you do a complaint, you have to restart it. And the whole thought was, every complaint, and I tried this and I only got to 7 days, but every complaint that you do, you're giving 1 coat of paint of negativity to yourself and other people like that. And so when you're in a situation where you're stressed and there's struggles, and all you want to do to your COO or to someone who's there is complain about what's going on, don't fucking do it. They don't want to hear it. It doesn't help the situation. They want to be surrounded by someone who's positive and wants to think of the solution. And so by not complaining, you lead to that energy. So
leadership is eating the worries yourself, right? Like that's what leadership is. It's trying to eat as much of that as you can, right? Before anyone else has to.
And that's where the power of like peer groups. And I'm part of YPO. I was part of Young Presidents Association. I was part of EO for 17 years, Entrepreneurs Organization. And there I have a forum. Playing the shit. Like, do whatever you need to do there. But to your point. So thank you for making me re-energize myself by talking about what I wasn't expecting to, that part of my book, because I'm actually working on my second book, which will hopefully be done sooner than later. But it's about the freedom of time, right? Your personal freedom, and travel to me is the ultimate result of the freedom of time and that mission.
And bringing these messages to lawyers, because we go to 3 years of law school. We don't take any business classes. We don't take any classes about packaging or pricing or marketing or any of these things. We don't even get any guidance whatsoever on how to run a law firm really in any meaningful way other than around ethics and accounts and that sort of stuff. And I think it's very important what you're doing. I love this conversation. Happy to have more. To say to lawyers, don't fear this. This isn't something that you should or push off. This is just how you're going to take better control of what you do anyway, right? And have better success with it. And we had absolutely tremendous success with fixed fee billing. And everybody who's listening to this can do it themselves. You don't need permission. It's nice if there's some people out there who will guide you. I think that's wonderful. But we had nobody when we did it. We just made it up as we went along. And I sent you a link. There are a couple posts that I've done on this. People can read it. And yeah, great talking to you.
Thank you, Todd. This was awesome. I hope to, one of these things is take bits and pieces of these things and put them up over time. I just need someone to do it because I don't have the time to do it.
Oh, God, yeah. Especially this one's going to be a mess.
No, it's not actually, but it's just like you said, figure out a system. Thank you so much.
All right. See you, man. Great to catch up.